Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, my good friend, Stephen Kotev. So he is, some say the good cop to my bad cop, a fellow student of Paul Linden. He specialises in conflict resolution, peace work, embodied peace work particularly. He's qualified in leadership coaching. He got an MA in conflict resolution from George Mason University, aikido black belt, Brazilian jiu-jitsu purple belt. Works in businesses, different organizations, is a professor at George Mason University now, I believe, as well. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you, my friend. It's a long time coming. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's super good to have you on the show. I really enjoyed working with you on the Paul Linden course as sort of two of his senior students. You know, I was chatting to you. We were chatting quite a lot, weren't we? Sort of between the calls and around the calls. And we would kind of go right back. So back in the day, me and you were like early Aikido extension students, which is a charity that works with aikido. And I think we're both white belts back then, and we were sort of up and coming. And now we've both established careers since then. That was well over 10 years ago.
Well, I appreciated your introduction because I do feel, and I'm going to own my own projections, but I do feel like a sibling or a brother to you in the sense that, if you look at our course and our trajectory, we were both right there at the beginning of many things. And, you're one of the few people I know who have spent a long time with Paul Linden studying his work, which to me is pretty rare. I don't have a lot of folks who I can really have that type of relationship with. And, the focus and the type of things that we've done, it was really funny to me because there were so many similarities. You're based in the UK, your family's Irish, you're married to a Slav. My dad's a Slav immigrant, and I've got, Irish relatives. I've lived in Northern Ireland for almost a year. So, there's all these kind of bizarro world ties to us in some sense.
And, for me, there's a resonance, well, not just because we come through like Paul's work, which definitely has a certain impact, but there's also that a lot of people in the field of sort of embodiment and peace, let's face it, they're a bunch of pussies. And, like to have a sort of fellow martial artist, rough working class East Coaster who could choke me out. All the Californians are writing letters of complaint now, but let them, let them. So this podcast, I should warn listeners, might be a bit rough around the edges. Me and you together again.
Well, I think there's something to. I love the name of your company, Integration. And for me, that's been one of the things that I've really had to learn was, I drank the Kool-Aid early on with peace and with Aikido in that, it's all about harmonizing. It's all about working with folks. And, my dad was abusive. I used sort of ways of avoiding and, trying to assuage him, tried to make him happy as a survival mechanism. And I sort of, hid back behind. And in that process, I really denied what I wanted. I denied my voice. I didn't really say what I wanted. And in that process, I realized I was incomplete. And that what I really needed to do was to develop sort of both sides of myself, the ability to assert and the ability to resolve, the ability to make peace. And it was a huge change for me to kind of own that ability to assert myself, where from like peacemaking traditions, it's always about sort of accommodating or making people happy, which was kind of empty to me over the long term.
Yeah, that kind of make nice can be disembodying and kind of half the picture. I kind of went the other way, in the kind of rough household growing up and the dad who wasn't always ideal. And, for me, it was like, right, I'm going to be a fighter and always fucking say what I think and push back. And, that pattern can be equally pathological. And there's some sort of balance, isn't there? That's probably healthy.
Right. That's why you're the bad cop and I'm the good cop.
I'm the bad cop. Oh, the bad cop's kind of cool. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So how do you get into this? So you're in this family that maybe wasn't always so much fun. It's a British understatement. And you kind of were, I imagine, was that the beginning of your interest in sort of conflict and the body there?
Well, was the middle cushion. I was this little body looking up at these two big people who were really upset. And from a very early age, I was like, there's got to be something better that we can do, and so it was, part of a coping mechanism to try to sort of make life more stable between my parents. But I was also like the only kid in, I was 10 years old, and I was the only kid that was trying to stop the fight on the playground. Everybody else was sort of circling around. I have this vivid memory of like a bird's eye view of all these kids standing around two of my friends, and they're like, fight, 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 fight. And I was the only one that was trying to sort of stand between the middle of them. To get to your question, that started me, interested in conflict just from, I guess, a base disposition. But all through high school, I started learning about conflict resolution there. And then my undergraduate program, I studied peace and conflict studies. I got a job in the field. So this was all I had done. And one day I was at this workshop, and there was this man talking about what happens to our body when we are in conflict. And I was completely stunned. I was completely blown away by what he was saying. And I had never thought about it. Nobody had ever talked about it. All of my training was very much mental, logical, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Just to jump in, people might not realize you can do degrees in peace studies at universities in the UK and in America. There's a whole field of work around conflict resolution. There's systems like nonviolent communication, and they tend to be kind of verbal, emotional systems, and they kind of tend not to look so much at the body.
Well, sometimes they're more logical. Like if you take a look at a lot of what people do for business or legal negotiations, say there's like a piece of property and people are upset about what's going to happen. There's this whole thing of like, well, what numbers do you offer each other so that you get to a number? It does.
That's not how it works, is it, man?
Well, but they're not even owning the emotional elements of it. So there's big departures from that. But then the body was even more detached. And this man was Paul Linden. Yeah. Here is a guy who had created this whole system that was about taking a look at what happens to you, to your physiology when you get upset, and how that affects how you interact with people, how you treat yourself, how you treat others. And I was just stunned, because I was somebody who I was very young, but that was the thing that I had focused all my attention on, and I had never heard anything of it before. Yeah. And that made me sit back and realize, like, wow, this is something pretty special. So, I became Paul's student and trained with him for 4 years in aikido and in somatics, and remain a student of him today, till today.
Yeah. So people let's focus on conflict then as one of your main areas. So people might think of, conflict is like, oh yeah, well, he wants this and I want that, and it's pretty logical, right? But actually, I just asked people listening to reflect. I mean, was your last conflict logical? And generally it's not, right? You don't think, what would be a great idea is if I shouted at that person, that's really going to get the outcome that I want. And people do all kinds of crazy shit. They'll say, I don't care about the money. Fuck it, I'm taking him to court. It's not really about the logic or the figures. You can't work that all out logically. So I'm playing devil's advocate here. Why is the body part of conflict?
It's good old Walsh language 101. Welcome home to the body. That's in the intro to this podcast. It's what we live in. It's what we experience our life in. And so, it's there's two things. I deal with a lot of sort of military and very sort of skeptical folks who are like, what is this conflict resolution, shit, and why should I care about it? Yeah. And I ask them, and I say, well, how many people do you effectively know that deal with nobody? Yeah. With no other human beings? Yeah, we're all relational. The answer is pretty much zero. You've got your hermits and your monks, but pretty much zero. So it's like, so then what happens when you put two people together in a room? You got conflict. So it's like, this happens to you every day. It's a life skill. You need to figure this out. If you don't figure it out, you're going to be dead or you're going to be ostracized. And neither of those are things that people want.
I mean, any relationship, right? Like, who listening out there has ever been in a relationship that never had a conflict? And it's like, was that conflict fun, or was it done well? And normally it's not so much fun.
Well, but you take a look at leadership. If you can't go and work with others, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. Nor on the flip side, if you want to go and be a part of a team, if you want to be effective in your workplace, you have to be able to go and figure out how you communicate, how you behave, what you embody. And that's the other part of it is that conflict happens every day and you're in your body every day. Yeah. So you need to have both of those. If you don't, you're missing so much of the tools that can enable you to live more of the life that you want.
Yeah, I like to start a few fights every day, Stephen. You know that. Just to stay sharp on the skills. So in terms of the body being relevant then, like, because we basically get stupid and mean in conflict, don't we? So what happens is people have a disagreement about whatever it is, and it might start off pretty logical, but then their fight-flight reaction comes in, that distress response, as Paul calls it. The listening stops, and I want to come on to listening in a bit more detail. People say things they regret, and that could be from anything ranging from a sharp word to a loved one that afterwards you go, that was a bit much, sorry about that, to killing someone, in the kind of passion of whatever it is. So that response isn't logical and in fact gets in the way of our logic and also our kindness. And that response is the thing that means that we do something shitty to each other. We don't do conflict in a smart, kind way. Is that a sort of fair summary of why the body is relevant here?
Well, yeah, because the experiences that we have, there's the mental stories that we tell, that Walsh, he's just an asshole and there's nothing good about him, and then there's the experience that comes in that will also come into play of my heart rate is up, I'm sweating, my vision has narrowed, I'm starting to tighten up, in my hands or in my throat or in my shoulders. And it creates this sort of feedback loop that makes everything worse. It's like I'm magnifying the thoughts in my head. Yeah. And in that process,
the thinking gets worse because the thinking's embodied, and also you start to perceive someone as more threatening. You remember all the threatening things that happened with that person, and your ability to listen is like physiologically reduced, not just metaphorically. And at that point, that conversation is really in trouble, right?
Right, because the higher functioning parts of your brain start to shut down, and all of the abilities to do problem solving, to do negotiation, to use language, all that stuff starts to deteriorate. Yeah. And what I talk to with folks is that, they will come into me because I deal with managers and employees all the time. And they're like, I hate you. You're the worst person in the world. And they will come in with an actual tunnel vision, where it's a finger pointing at the other person. And it's like, you are the source of all my problems. Yeah. And what I try to do is first embody in myself a sense of calm, a sense of radiance, in the sense of that Linden, expansiveness that is grounded, that allows me to handle more of the tension in the room.
This is what a good parent does with a child, right? By being well regulated, they help the child out of their distress, not through, a child doesn't understand words, but also on this level of people's physiology. I mean, you can even say to people, oh, you motherfucker, I hate you, you're so ugly. And as long as you're saying it calmly, they'll actually calm down and smile, because that tone and that body is so much more important than the actual words you're saying when it comes to the impact on that person.
Well, and in the work that I do, my wife is like, are you crazy? Because basically it's people just screaming at each other. That's taken to an extreme, but they don't like each other. They're very upset. And I have to be comfortable in that environment. I have to be able to engage them, whoever they are. I was listening to your podcast with Bence, and you were talking about how at your wedding you had military, business, and hippies. Yeah. You were one of the few people who could go around and interact with all of them. Well, if you're going to do my job, you got to be able to do that. You got to be able to go and talk to the guy who likes to go to monster truck rallies, and the woman who wants to yarn bomb some tree. And then everything in between. You have to be able to do that work, and you have to be able to embody a sense of authenticity in yourself, that you're authentically able to listen and be present with them, and then they will open up to you.
Yeah, I'm taking sides with the monster truck guy, just for the record. I'm saying that up front. And so how do you do that then? Again, I kind of know how you do it, but like, how do, like, someone's out there, they're listening to this, they're like, yeah, you know, I was talking to my wife or my husband yesterday, or my boss, or my kid, and I was just in this rage, and, you know, my blood was boiling, and, you know, they might be aware of some of the physiology, their heart was racing, their shoulders were tense. Like, what do they do?
Right. So there's twofold answer to that. The first is short term, and then the second part is long term. So short term is all the embodiment fundamentals that hopefully you have or you're seeking to develop. So the first one is centering. You know, you want to actually go and do things like breathe from your belly, relax your throat and jaw, widen your vision.
Yeah.
All the stuff that people have heard over and over again.
And you want to be everyone, man. Not everyone knows that stuff. Like, for me,
true.
Like, that's a like quick Paul Linden type quick wins, and people can listening to the centering podcast if they want more. But like, people can try that now. Like, I find just when I'm like, I was walking along the street today, just getting in a little bit of fight flight, just being rushed. Wasn't even arguing with anyone, just a bit rushed. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, on the internet, just busy, you know, lots of emails or whatever before I talk to you. And it's like, just that, like, relaxing the belly, the jaw, letting the peripheral vision, having a sense of expansiveness, you know, those things are epic. Those things really help.
Yeah, yes. And they're absolutely essential in the short term.
Yeah.
If you want to go and you want to bring about a presence that's going to help you be a better parent, if you want to bring about a presence that's going to help you be a better leader, if you want to bring about the presence that's going to help you get along with other people, you know, people in your office or people in your neighborhood, those are all very effective, simple tools that are going to help you in that moment deal with whatever it is well.
I guess the trick, though, is that people might not have the body awareness to know they need to do that. Like, they can be quite far down the road before they go, hang on a minute, I'm now screaming, and that's probably not helpful.
Right. And that goes back to why it's important to train and learn this information, because if you don't know what your habits are, you're not going to be able to be preventative in regulating yourself.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm thinking about my boss, and immediately I am opening up 5 different windows, trying to find lots of different things to distract myself. My heart rate is going up. I'm distracted. I'm starting to get hot and sweaty. If you have some type of awareness, if you've built up some type of awareness that that's what you do, that's what I love about Paul Linden's work is that you can then start to focus on, well, what are the things I need to do to bring my heart rate down? What are the things that I need to do to go and start to center myself so that I'm able to be more focused? What are the things that I need to do to start to regulate myself?
Yeah.
That's
you've got to practice in a place where you can actually notice yourself, develop those skills. You know, like, I feel like asking people to do centering when they're under pressure is a big ask if they haven't had a place where they're regularly doing that, whether it's a yoga class or an aikido class. Like, they need some dojo, some place to practice, or else they're just not going to remember, you know. And I know all sorts of people that have read all the books on conflict resolution or yoga or meditation or all these kind of theories, but then it's like, okay, but are you practicing enough that when the shit hits the fan, you can actually get that out? And for me, there's a number of factors. There's also just like my base physiology. You know, if I haven't eaten or slept well, like, I didn't sleep that well last night. I was up late working, and I noticed I'm a little bit easier to go into that response today. Or if I haven't eaten if I've been fasting, I can get a bit narky quicker. And then it's like, is it just like hot weather? There's factors beyond my control as well, right? You know, so there's the physiology stuff. And then I notice there's also another piece, which is almost like therapeutic work. Like, I get disproportionate, this is different from Paul's work. There's a group of people that disproportionately trigger me to what they do. And then I get interested about that, and I tell it to my therapist, and I go, oh, it's because they remind me of when I was at school. Or, you know what I mean? So it's like a historical triggering that's now in the system.
Well, and that's the part 2 of my answer. The first part is you know, you build your awareness, build your ability to regulate yourself, build your ability to center and ground yourself. And then the second part is you got to deal with your baggage. Yeah. You got to deal with whatever is the stuff underneath. You know, I really enjoyed, you know, the podcast about the sort of integral approach, and owning this understanding that just meditation alone isn't going to get you somewhere. You have to do therapy, and vice versa. You need those two elements. And it's the same thing in conflict is that if I have some type of inherent issues with somebody who is the political opposite of me, I need to do some understanding of myself of what that is. Or it's the other one that you put up that was just really well done. The one that you put up about it doesn't, keep calm doesn't matter unless you have a way of self-regulating and you've addressed your trauma history.
Oh, that meme there's a British meme called "Keep Calm and Carry On," which apparently is from the Second World War. I'm not sure if it actually was or not. It's very British, and it's often put on cups of tea and things like that. And the meme was "Keep calm and carry on" is useless advice unless you have a method for self-regulation and you address your trauma history and therapeutic history more broadly. And that got something like 900 shares. I mean, it's like one of the most shared things I've ever made. But I think because it sort of concisely says, look, you can't. It's like there was this old comedy sketch in England of these. They were called the Three Scousers, the Three Liverpudlians, and one would say, "Hey, calm down, calm down, calm down," and they'd always tell each other to calm down, and then they just end up fighting more because telling people to calm down. It doesn't work very well, particularly if you say it in a stressed way.
Well, it's also that if you're insecure, that insecurity is going to show up no matter how well regulated you are. That when I work with my students, when I teach folks, my mantra is who you are is who you bring into the room. So if you come in stressed, not well slept, have a set of assumptions about somebody, all those things are going to show through. If you're going to go and engage and you have doubt about your ability to perform, or you think you know everything, all that kind of stuff is going to show up. You're going to embody that sense.
People will feel it, won't they? Contempt. People will feel it. If you've got, I was working in business for a while and I had this subtle contempt of business people. And I had to work on that because it took me a couple of years because I'd been sort of taught a story about business people all being selfish and horrible. And even though I was good at acting and smiling and stuff, they smelt it. They smelt that I didn't respect them on some level. And I had to really do inner work. And you'll see the other way you'll see this is people just fucking projecting all over me, right? Like Donald Trump. Donald Trump and Mark Walsh were both symbols of money, sex, and power. And we're both unashamable in that. Now, I'm a good human being, and he's not, so there's a big difference. However, the fact we embody the three shadows of the liberal left, particularly, in a way which means when someone usually from the sort of tree-hugging side of things, the Guardian reader gets upset with me, I may have been an asshole and fucked up, so I may be at blame, but they're adding a sort of 50% extra special value shadow side of themselves on top of that. And then I'm just left going, what the fuck is this? It's out of proportion as a reaction. And we all do that. I did that the other day with someone. And it's unless you've become aware of where your triggers are because you won't own that side. And you also reminded me about the feeling secure part being important. There's the love and the power in Paul's work. And people get the love part. The being non-judgmental, the kind of Rogerian acceptance, listening. But then what people don't get, that martial artists do get, is that actually when you're coming from that position of power, there's no fear.
Well, and that was the other part that I wanted to get to, was that in studying Aikido was a beautiful method for me to learn how to deal with other people. It was a beautiful system to say, how am I going to interact with different people? How am I going to create my own boundaries? How can I harmonize with folks? It's a beautiful conceptual system of how to sort of behave in society. It's not a very good system if you want to stop yourself from being mugged. And the data set that Aikido uses, so the type of attacks that Aikido is, in a sense, defending itself from, and the level of aggression that you experience in Aikido, to me, was disconnected from reality. So if you're really trying to harmonize, if you're really trying to go and work with something, the information, the data that you're trying to work with is off. You don't have the right parameters. You don't have the right information to actually try to solve for. And that was part of the reason why I made a transition into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, was that my experiences were so much more powerful in the sense of fear. Like I'm afraid that I'm really going to get hurt, and that I'm like, if I don't if I don't respond in an appropriate way, I'm going to be unconscious. I'm going to be harmed, and like they'll protect me. They'll stop if I ask them to stop. But, that sense of aggression and being exposed to that level of aggression and being able to build boundaries and build capacity to deal with that aggression allowed me to be more peaceful, because I had more confidence in, if someone was going to come after me, it's not like I have to fight them, but I know what I need to do to just, in a sense, get away, which would then allow me to feel more regulated and to feel more confident and comfortable if somebody were to get upset.
Yeah. No, I had this situation the other day. I was doing some yoga in Shrewsbury, which is a sort of small town, provincial town. And I was doing some yoga on the grass by this church, and this guy comes up to me kind of half drunk from the pub and starts taking the piss out of me. And I take my headphones off and I just start calmly answering his questions. He's like, "Oh, mate, you do like chakras and that, innit?" And I was like, "No, I don't do that." And I look him in the eye, and he's immediately aware as an animal that I'm calm. And that's weird, because he thought I was a kind of yoga wimp, and he's bigger than me physically, but as an animal, his whole system's going, "Hang on a minute, why?" And he ended up being like quite curious about yoga and saying, "Oh, where are you from?" Would be reasonably friendly, but because there was a calm there, because I thought I could easily choke this guy out if I need to, like this guy's half shot, and I don't think he'd stand a chance.
There's a thing that I've found that is consistent, because humans are social beings, because we interact in a society and live in a society and we operate in a society. Inherently, for me, in my experience, humans are interested in connection. They're trying to find ways of connecting to each other. Sometimes they do it in positive ways, and sometimes they do it in negative ways. But what's beautiful about your illustration was that, as opposed to you going and being like, "Fuck off, mate, and I'm going to just, sort you out right here and now," you were able to go and answer his questions and then allow for a connection, which de-escalated the situation and changed the whole dynamic. And that's the beauty of the whole thing is that you're able to engage. You're not having your fear take over. You're able to then go and answer his questions. And then he's getting the experience of connecting to you, which then, in a sense, changes the whole thing from an adversarial environment to, much ado about nothing eventually.
And so for listeners, Aikido has this sort of fairly stylized, and there's different styles of Aikido, some sort of harder and softer, but it's a fairly stylized kind of system, and it really is quite anti-competition in many ways, and it has often this sense of slight spiritual superiority going on, but often from quite a fantasy point of view. And even Aikido who think they're quite rough and tough, actually, my experience as an Aikido black belt, within a few minutes of training with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, I was just getting choked out repeatedly, and I just didn't have a clue how to kind of handle and they'll say, "Yes, but it's not realistic, because in real life," and then again, there's more fantasy, but there's no actual real testing, whereas the BJJ guys, you're rolling around on the floor, you're wrestling, someone's trying to strangle you. And it's terrifying. And in terms of sort of experience with like self-regulation, I remember being quite panicked a few times in the early days of training when someone was sort of on top of me and trying to choke me out.
Yeah. And this is this is, if you're really interested in studying Aikido as an art of peace, the thing that I found that was so difficult was that, you didn't have the right information. So, in the sense of, you didn't have the right data, you didn't have the right type of violence to actually deal with it. Because to me, a lot of Aikido training was sitting in a car pretending to drive the car. You're simulating certain things, but you're not actually out doing it. And for me, jiu-jitsu was much more about driving. You're still driving. You're still driving in a parking lot, right? It's not, everyone's like, "Oh, no holds barred. I'm going to gouge your eyes out. I'm going to, it's like, I'll stop your brain. It's like, oh, okay, buddy. Yeah, sure. We can go down there. But for the most part, you're dealing with my embodiment, my personal reactions, my patterns, my triggers, my baggage came to the forefront. in jiu-jitsu very clearly regarding aggression and regarding fear. You know, I have a much better understanding of myself, but I also have a much greater comfort. You know, I have so many more friends who are outside of what I started off from a political spectrum, who are beautiful people. They're law enforcement, they're military, they're politically much more conservative. And, you know, they're also, you know, I grew up mostly, you know, lower middle class. You know, I have friends who are, you know, they didn't have a good life, but I got to be with them, and how I show up with them doesn't carry that same set of garbage that goes with it.
Yeah.
But it was because I went and I put myself in a different parameter. You know, what I find is so sad about Aikido is that, you know, there's this denial of competition. But have you ever heard of a guy named Martin Nowak? He's so this guy, he goes and he studies, he's from Harvard, and he studies biology and species. And one of the things that's really interesting about him is that he was taking a look at what do animal species do in response to competition and in response to collaboration. And what he found was that biologically, if you're a bird, if you're a lizard, if you're a monkey, whatever, that if you're in a highly competitive environment where it's everybody for themselves, cooperating is going to be very successful if everyone works together to work as an antidote to that. And the more people cooperate, eventually it's going to be to your advantage to compete. So you have this Mobius loop, this sort of continual thing. And from, you know, there's all these people who talk about peace, but they deny competition.
It's part of I say this to yoga people the same. I do yoga competitions, you know, and in tree pose and who falls over first loses. And people just think it's such anathema. They get really upset about it. They say it's not spiritual. And then they have a big competition about who's the most spiritual. And it just comes out sideways in weird ways that we don't acknowledge. It's part of biology.
Well, you know, what's interesting for me is that in BJJ, everybody knows their rank. You know, there's like, you know, I'm a purple belt, but I'm in my 40s. And I know that a 20-year-old collegiate wrestler who's never done any Brazilian jiu-jitsu is going to have my lunch. You know, this guy is going to be talented. So I don't come in, you know, like if you look at the Aikido dynamics, the senior student is always teaching the junior student, but it's a way of ensuring it's like maintaining their ego. Where in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, everyone's like, yeah, you know what, I lost. And you were better than me in that moment.
Loads of ego in Aikido, because it's you don't ever have to step down from that. And
because they're not competing.
Very humble. Everyone's getting choked out, right, by someone.
Right. You know, and it's not about saying, hey, let's compete. It's about owning that both exist. And that if you want to be more peaceful, if you want to be better at your job, if you want to be better, you know, it's like parents, you know, yes, everybody wants to be loved, wants to be the number one loved parent, right? Everyone wants to have their kid run to mommy, or everyone wants their kid to run to daddy. You can't deny the fact that people are going to want acknowledgement. People are going to want affirmation. They're going to want those things. But they're also going to have to understand that, hey, listen, you're a team. You got to raise these kids. You got to work together. Where I find that there's so many disconnections and dissatisfactions is that they're denying these immutable things. They're denying competition. They're denying violence. And if they were actually to go and engage with it and learn about it, they would be much more peaceful. They would be much more regulated. They would be much more successful.
What about listening then? Because that's one of my kind of weaknesses, and it's one that I kind of work on the podcast a little bit, try and listen to people a little bit. How does that come in? So we've already established the kind of fight or flight response reduces people's ability to listen, and we see that in the political sphere now, and the social media, and just more and more we see that, I think. You know, what can someone do who finds themselves like me, kind of interrupting or not listening to people very well?
Right. Well, you know, for you, what I would tell, you know, if I was just talking to Mark Walsh, it would be just wait till they're done talking.
What if they're boring me?
Then fuck you. shut up.
You can skillfully interrupt sometimes. I mean, even as the
you can. But if you're talking about building, listening skills, the first thing you got to be able to do is sit in your own skin and listen. And what that means is that you got to let them go until they stop talking. That's first part. And if that's hard, then that's where you start your work. And you would build it up as you would any place else, So you have that desire to interrupt, right? Well, can you delay that by 5 seconds? Can you delay that by 10 seconds? And then eventually, can you wait till they're done? The other thing that I do is I tell people, have a piece of paper in front of you, write down what you want to say, let them finish. If you're worried, you're going to forget it. Then come back to it. Right. But the first part is just to be still. If you can't be still, it doesn't matter, because there isn't, people aren't going to have the experience of you of being listened to if they don't feel A, you're present, and B, you're able to go and wait long enough for them to be done. Yeah.
No, I get that. Sometimes it's the kind of agitation that jumps in. Other times it's that sense of, I know what they're going to bloody say anyway. It's kind of dull.
Right, but that's where for you, it's what is going on with the dullness, right? What is that about? Because I will own my baggage, where sometimes I want to finish people's sentences because I want us to move along, because I enjoy interacting with them so much. I want to get them to the next thing and then to the thing that I haven't heard before, right? In the same sense, we've learned that sometimes it's like, remember that one thing in Star Wars where I think it was like C-3PO is trying to tell them that like something bad's going to happen, and they just keep talking and don't let him finish. And he's like, "Oh, excuse me," and they're like, "Oh, we got to go. There's something bad's going to happen." And they're like trying to plan to do this escape, and they're trying to solve a problem that really isn't their real problem. Their real problem is the thing that this other person is saying, but they're not letting them finish, which is incredibly common in the workplace. It's incredibly common in relationships. It's in intimate relationships. All those elements. So being able to just have the ability, even if it fucking bores you to pieces, just to let them get it all out. Sometimes there's something interesting that comes in that you haven't seen.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get that. Okay, so what else have we got to talk about? We're talking about aikido, jiu-jitsu, listening, conflict. I mean, what's
Well, hold on. Let me add one other piece to listening before we move on. So, I listened to your David Weinstock podcast, and you're talking about linguistics and how linguistics is important. So the second part to listening that can be effective, in addition to being still, because some people are going to be good at being still, is the ability to paraphrase back what's being said.
So, Stephen, what are you saying is there's two parts to listening, and the second part is about speaking back what people have said. Is that right?
Oh, that's a beautiful paraphrasing.
Do you feel heard or manipulated?
Well, you can do that, and you have to take the pretentiousness out of your voice.
Yeah, sure.
But being able just to say, so Mark, you sound fucking boring. It's like, Mark, it sounds like it's fucking boring to listen to people speak all the time to the end, right? And it's like, okay, and being able to have that skill set. And there's all these other conflict resolution skill sets. Conflict resolution is multidisciplinary. They take a look at psychology. They take a look at sociology. They take a look at a whole range of things, biology, economics. And, there is this element of, well, what are people really trying to say? Not what they're asking for, but what are they really trying to say? And if you're able to repeat back what they're saying and understand or try to understand what it is that they're asking for. You could say, so Mark, it sounds like these people are really fucking boring to listen to, so you want to interrupt them. And I'm curious to find out if what the sense of boredom is about.
Yeah.
That's a very different conversation as opposed to like, fuck you, mate, I'm tired of you interrupting me.
Yeah. And in terms of, that's something I got from NVC was like listening to the kind of need underneath the thing that was being said or the insult or whatever. I found that very helpful in NVC. And the other thing I got from NVC, which I really liked, was this intention's really important. Like, because you can learn these things as kind of tricks, and you see some kind of crass manager who's been on a management course and they come back and they're like paraphrasing in a really kind of schmarmy way. And it just feels icky because it's like, it's not real because they're not really trying to understand. They just learn a trick.
Well, and there's two elements to that. One is to be authentic and actually trying to repeat back what they're saying. The second part is from an embodiment perspective. For me, if I got someone who's upset, I want to add a little bit of that energy in my response. I want to be, if I'm pretty baseline, I want to add a little bit to that to sort of start to emotionally and somatically, physiologically, embody sort of where they're at. And I don't want to go full, anger, but I just want to be like, yeah, you sound fucking pissed.
There's a match and lead thing going on, right? Where they go, I feel heard because you've taken on some of the emotion that I have.
Right. And then I regulate myself back and bring myself back to that more calm state, which then goes back, or vice versa. If you got someone that says like, hey, it sounds like you're really having a hard time, changing my tone, changing my whole, organization, and then, getting that resonance, but then bringing myself back to center. That equilibrium point allows folks to think more clearly and hopefully, embody a more healthy state.
And this is another embodied piece, isn't it? Allowing ourselves to resonate with people, allowing ourselves to express across a wide emotional range, and then also self-regulating enough that we don't get caught in their sadness or their anger or, whatever it is.
Well, and that's why the baggage part is so important. Your statements about when you were talking to your therapist about, your partner, your husband, your wife, your children, your family, those are the hardest people to work on. But being able, the embodiment process, studying the body is a way for me of being a better person. And it's a worthwhile practice to get good at because it's going to pay you these dividends down the road. It's a life skill that's going to matter in a bunch of different places. And figuring out, if I have a competition and envy about your level of success, I have to own for myself that that's my baggage. And I have to figure out how I can be effective in dealing with that myself, and how I would want to go and speak towards you if you and I were going to have an engagement. That's my responsibility.
Yeah. I think that taking responsibility for our own emotional reaction is a really important piece here, isn't it? I think there's a radical responsibility at the heart of Paul's work, which is nobody makes you angry, as he'll kind of say, right? And I think that's really been lost in modern times on the left and also the right.
Well, but you also look at it as this thing of, you're giving away your power because somebody else is entirely, can lead you by the nose to do whatever you want. But you're also, there's no sense of agency. There's no sense of who am I? What am I able to do? It's like if you're this porous being that is, completely disrupted by what somebody else says, to me, you're not going to survive.
Well, I see Stoicism making a comeback as a way of kind of pushing back against this trend of the kind of, I'm triggered. And it's like, no, you triggered yourself, motherfucker. Like, come on, or else everyone would be triggered when you're triggered, and they're not. So it can't be the trigger. It's you. Come on, take responsibility to yourself that way.
Well, and you can also say hey, it's just not acceptable to do what you did. And I'm not going to go and allow that to, because there's the inverse side where it's just like, you're triggered. So I have, the person who did the action has no responsibility. It's like, you're triggered. It's like, no. That's also the other side that's not acceptable. But it's owning both elements of saying, I have to be accountable for myself and you have to be accountable for you. And both of those things have to be acknowledged if you really want to have a healthy relationship. Yeah.
Well, what about this, interesting terminology I heard the other day? Someone said someone verbally assaulted this person. It seems like words are increasingly being equated to violence. There's hate speech laws in the UK. It would be illegal for me to say certain things on this podcast. Even as a joke, it would be illegal. And that really worries me. And the equating of words with physical violence, to me, they're not equivalent. So verbally assaulting someone, I think, well, hang on a minute. Would you rather be insulted or punched in the face? It's a pretty easy choice for most of us. So do you see that trend as someone who works in conflict to equate words and physical violence?
Yeah, of course. When I work with folks, the first thing is to build a physical awareness of what your responses are. Where are you holding tension? What's happening with your breath? What's happening with your vision? What's happening with your posture? Here's the physical part. But then, I will, and this is, fundamental Paul Linden stuff as well, but it's what is a word or a phrase that upsets you? And, they've done the functional MRI where they do the brain scan. And, there was a study done where it was focused on exclusion, where in a sense, like, hey, we're going to go to a party, but we're not going to invite Mark. And that when they did the fMRI scans, that some of those verbal statements had brought the same brain response as the actual physical trigger, of like, hey, well, I'm going to harm you. It like activated the same parts in the brain. So, there is, if you look at the actual fight or flight response, the critique is that it's a great tool if you're out in the Sahara trying to survive against a lion. Yeah. But in our regular life, it's oh my God, what happened on Twitter? I can't believe how many Facebook messages or Instagram or whatever, and now I'm getting the same response, but it's not really the same threat.
Yeah, because Donald Trump isn't actually killing all the college kids in America, right? Like, he might be unpleasant and not a great president, but this kind of response, like they're acting like they're existentially threatened by him. And it's like, dude, calm the fuck down,
Well, in that situation, the words take on a power that in many circumstances is not in alignment with reality. The situation is that people have said, well, that's my experience. My experience is that you're saying these things, and this is how I feel. Yeah. And the flip side of that is what is your capacity to have boundaries, and what is your capacity to regulate yourself? Because if you actually have a boundary, there's certain stuff that's just going to slide off of you that's not going to feel threatening. Mm-hmm. If you have no ability to say no, and I don't want that, and get away from me, then people are going to be able to say anything to you, and you're going to fall apart because you haven't been able to sort of differentiate one thing from the next.
Yeah. Okay, so we've established that the comically weak millennials are to blame. That's good. As we come to the end of the podcast, that's good that we agree there. And I love your stuff, man. In terms of like finding out more about you, where do people go?
I'm dead simple to find. It's Stephen with a PH, and then my last name is Kotev, Kotev. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and work in a variety of different environments. From primarily, I do most of my work in the workplace, but I also do academia and government. Do a lot of work here because this is the new Rome, Washington D.C. So I do a lot of work in that sense.
Rome is nicer. The resources section on your website is pretty good too, though. So there's all sorts of articles there. People can check that out. I've just been looking at this. There's a whole kind of load of good stuff there. Listen, I'm dying for a piece. We need to wrap this up. Final message about the body, Stephen.
Yep. Well, actually, I want to place it as a challenge to your listeners.
Great.
What I want to challenge your listeners to do, especially the folks who feel like they're embodied and have an embodied practice, is to go and start a different embodied practice that is outside your political spectrum. So if you're a yoga person, go out and go do something that's completely different from you. Go in and study Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Go learn boxing. Go do wrestling. Learn how to use a gun. Or if you're on the flip side, if you're somebody who is law enforcement, military, go to a yoga class and literally go there to do the embodiment practice and see what happens to you there. But go there also as a way of meeting people. Because I have relationships with people, and I've learned things. When we had riots here in the U.S., there was conversations amongst my friends who did jiu-jitsu, who are law enforcement, who gave me very profound insights about the world that a cop was living in, that I never would have gotten if all I did was ingest, it's the bubble that is Facebook rhetoric. And so my challenge to them is to go do that other practice And if you're somebody who's all about peace, to go learn about what it's like to have somebody be aggressive to you, and how you can go and be more comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah. So all the uptight conservatives, I'll be leading a eye gazing session at my house tonight. And for all you hippie bitches out there, let's get down the gun ranch. It's I remember the first time I shot a shotgun with some American. I've got an American and a Russian couple that I know, American woman, Russian, and they took me shooting. And I thought I'd hate it. I'd be like, no, I'm too spiritual for this. And I don't believe in sort of shooting animals for sport or anything, but it's just a pump action shotgun. And I was just walking down the range, blowing things away. It was fantastic. So I can the Americans are right on the shotguns and the handguns and the Uzis and
Well, it's also like, if you're into free range organic chicken, go and skin your own free range organic chicken. Have the experience of rending the flesh off what it is. You go and do that thing that is so different from you, so that you're going to have that experience that is so counter to what you think it is, and you're going to learn a lot in the process about yourself and about what you need to do to embody your values.
Rending the flesh off free range chickens. I think that's a nice place to end it. I think
it's a very Walshian way.
We went Walshian. I'm Walshian now. So I think we've upset everyone, which is lots of practice for conflict resolution for you coming up, Stephen. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.